I'm delighted to say we're now joined by Esther McVey. Very good morning to you, Esther.
Morning.
Former Minister, of course, for Common Sense in the Tory party. Now a really good sort of thorn in the side of Labour, which we'll get to in a minute. Let's get a quick voice note first from Dan, though, on busing protesters.
Morning, Mike. Dan here. The way this would be organised, if it's the same as 25 years ago when I was a student, is that the SWP would contact local groups that they have and say, right, ask your members, can anyone go to Epping to counter a far-right demonstration? That's how they would phrase it, obviously. And then certain people would come. The police would normally get wind of this, right? They wouldn't organise it, but they get wind of it. And what they would do is normally hold the protesters together at Epping Station. And then they would escort them to the demonstration hot point, as it were, or basically to the hotel. The protesters know where the hotel is, so what the police are trying to do is just avoid random people turning up.
Well, that may well be, but nevertheless, it's not really the police's job to take them there. I can understand, like they do with football fans, walking them to the stadium, where they used to, when I was a kid, and we used to have to be kept separate. You know, if you were going to White Hart Lane, if you were a Man United fan, as I then was with my dad, we would go up one side of Seven Sisters Road, and the Spurs fans would be on the other side. But the police didn't actually put you in a van and drive you there, which is what they appear to have done in Epping, which is seemingly an incredible thing to do, isn't it? Have you ever heard of anything like this?
Absolutely extraordinary. If you knew an opposite group were coming, you saw them at the station, surely you'd say, go back home. You don't want confrontation. You don't say, let me lead you to where you're going. I mean, that chief constable has some serious questions to answer, and he should be gone if this is what
Well, particularly given what happened, because given that they not only took them there, but they then took them back again to the station, they then despite the fact that there was footage of it, denied that it had happened. And then finally, when they saw the footage, said, oh yeah, actually we did do that. So, you know, so first of all, they've lied about it. Then now they've admitted doing it. And the act of doing it itself should be a resigning matter.
So when you've denied it, you know it's wrong. So what were they doing? Was it a blame game? Were they trying to do diversionary tactics? I.e. they didn't have to do the policing. They were bringing another group in to do it. Whatever it is, whatever the explanation is, whatever the thought process were going through the chief constable's mind, they were wrong. And this is upsetting the public, because it wasn't some angry demonstration. It was people saying, why are illegal immigrants being treated better than our own population? And people knew there were issues bubbling, and the police should have been, if anything, absolutely squashing the upset, and those people need to be listened to.
You could argue that by doing what they did, they actually made the likelihood of violence even more likely.
Yeah, well, when you bring two opposing sides together, you are inflaming a situation, and that was wrong. Police aren't there to do that. So this, I think, is... I can only call it extraordinary, and that chief constable, in my mind, needs to go if he can't explain what.
But again, you know, no sign of Yvette Cooper anywhere. We haven't heard her making any kind of prognostication on this. And we spoke to a woman yesterday who's one of the mothers who was demonstrating down there, and she's very, very vocal about it, and she's been interviewed a couple of times by other outfits as well. And I said, what would your message be to Keir Starmer? She said, just tell him to come down here. You know, him and Yvette Cooper, tell them to come and talk to us and understand why we feel the way we feel, and understand why putting migrants in a hotel, all single men, next to a secondary school with teenage girls walking around is not a very good idea. You know, just come and talk to us. But of course, he doesn't have that common touch, does he?
Well, it's not only that. He doesn't want to believe that's what's going on. His idea of multiculturalism and diversity is our biggest strength, and everybody should come in. So he doesn't want to hear. He doesn't want to see. He's, if anything, in denial. And I did a piece about, over the summer recess, they're going to do Operation Save Starmer. And if you look what he's doing, it's like doubling down on his beliefs, which is going to gaslight the country further. So, you know, his first thing is setting up a department for 10 Downing Street. That's more advisors for him to back up and endorse what he's saying. And I always say Boris Johnson tried to do that before his ousting. It's not going to be a good thing. He's going to bring in another communications person, an old Blairite friend of Alistair Campbell, again, to do more public, a man called Tim Allen, you might know, who's actually going to do more of what he's saying. So we're going to hear more of that. And then a reshuffle.
But then, you know, if he does anything like he did this week at the front of the liaison committee, and he starts talking absolute balderdash and starts going, oh yeah, we've got loads of houses for people to go and stay in, and everyone's going, hang on a minute, you know, there's 1.3 million people on a waiting list. What do you mean you've got loads of houses? He was terrible. I mean, he's even worse than Rachel Reeves was yesterday in front of the Lord's Economic Committee.
That's why he's not going to listen. That's what I'm saying. Really, the sooner he's gone, the better, because he can't listen. He's very robotic. He can't adapt to change. And he needs to say, gosh, everything's changed. It's worse than I thought. Actually, this is what we need to do. And that's the same with Rachel Reeves. She can't change what she's doing. Everybody said to her, taxing businesses is the worst thing you could do. Increasing employers' national insurance contribution, you're actually crushing intake, you're crushing growth, and she can't see it. Her thing, robot, is let's tax more. And she should have seen she put capital gains tax up last year, and what's happened? The revenues from it have gone down.
Because people won't pay more tax. And certainly when they look around now, when they look now around what the money's going on, and the migrant issue now is reaching kind of boiling point, people aren't going to be willing to do it. They're just not going to do it. And the Times this morning has got it. The Prime Minister is now fearing that there's going to be a summer of riots. Well, no, whatever it is, you say Sherlock, because at the end of the day, you know, the country is kind of rising up against him. Because everywhere you look, you know, last night it was in Canary Wharf, everywhere you look, there's another hotel being commandeered, there's no sign of people not coming, people are going to continue to come for the rest of time, as far as we know.
Right, the best thing he could do over the summer recess is actually go to each of these places and understand what's going on, not sort of go back to Islington, not hang out with his mates from the bubble and his international lawyers and his
he's got another state visit coming up today. He's got Narendra Modi coming in. People are not going to be very happy about that either.
No, he does need to get out of his mindset, get away from people like Lord Hermer, and speak to people and understand what's going on. I'm afraid he is deluded and so distant.
He's hopeless
from the public.
But he's not the only one. You know, you were questioning Bridget Phillipson this week on where the money is coming from, or where the money's going. Let's have a look.
Mr. Speaker, this government is hampering schools from recruiting new teachers. First, they hiked up the cost through the increase in employers' national insurance contributions, and then the money promised to state schools from charging VAT on private fees was actually spent on housing instead. So, can the Secretary of State tell the House how much the increase in employers' national insurance contributions will cost schools in total over this Parliament?
Mr. Speaker, we are investing record sums in our state schools. The party opposite, however, want to take money out of our state schools to give tax breaks back to private schools. That tells you everything you need to know about their priorities.
They specialise in not answering the question, don't they?
Well, what I've pointed out, and it doesn't matter which Secretary of State I speak to, they don't know the cost. They don't know how much money is required by a school, the cost of it, and they certainly don't want to add in sort of the cost of the national insurance contribution to employers. They just haven't a clue. And it's not just Bridget Phillipson there who didn't know the answer. No. Very simple, hadn't a clue.
They're quite
what
rude
the answer
as well, aren't they? Though?
They are rude, and they just talk at you, as I said. I asked Ed Miliband when he came in about net zero being wonderful. I said three simple questions. It was his statement. He came to the House telling us all how wonderful net zero was. I said, OK, can you tell us how much it will cost? Can you tell us who'll be paying it? And can you tell us, if we get to net zero, what will the change be in global temperature? Couldn't answer those questions, and I would say that was the basics of what he was trying to push on us. None of them know simple economics. No. None of them know the cost, and that's why we're in the trouble we're in.
They must be terrified as well whenever they go into the House, but they are going to be asked questions by yourself, or by whether Lee Anderson was asking Ed Miliband a similar question as well. And, you know, everybody can see what they're doing. It's like, you know, I don't know who they think they're fooling. You know, they have been the worst performing government, and I think the worst performing collection of ministers I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, I think it's all ideology. It's all student politics, and they don't have that real world experience.
Yeah.
They've got no practical experience. So what they say in an ideal world, etc., when they're with their friends at university might make sense, but when you move that to the real world, it doesn't, and their sums really don't add up at all.
No.
And when you saw Rachel Reeves in that committee yesterday, she was a broken woman.
She was.
She's out of her depths.
Yeah.
And if there's one thing I think she does know, even though it's nothing about the economics, I think she now knows she doesn't know where to go and she's floundering. I thought it was cruel. I think she needs to be removed out of that department. We've seen her in tears. We saw her there not being able to answer. And I would equate it to like Biden.
Yeah.
At the end, we all knew it was cruel on Biden. He shouldn't be running America. She shouldn't be running the economy.
Somebody said to me yesterday that Keir Starmer's actually like our version of Biden, because he just doesn't make any sense. He doesn't really know what he's doing. He staggers from one thing to another. He says these things which aren't true. He asserts that they're doing something which they're not doing. You know, today, for example, is supposed to be the day they start, seizing the assets of these gang members. I haven't seen it happen yet. I don't think it's going to happen today. He says this is when we're beginning to do it. Well, it doesn't mean anything, you know. Let me ask you about your own party, because a bit of a reshuffle this week. James Cleverly back in.
Yes.
Is there going to be any more of that? What does it mean for Kemi Badenoch?
Well, I think Kemi wanted to bring more people in, which she has done there. I think it was started because Ed Arger wasn't well. And he said he needed to step down, so there was a little bit of sort of a limited reshuffle there. I think it's great to have James Cleverly back. I think he's a good performer. He actually gets on with the backbenchers as well, so I think all of that's really important. New energy into the front bench there, because somebody had to move away. So I take it as a positive change, actually. I think that's good for her, and I think that's good for the front bench. Also, I think Neil O'Brien moving into doing policy, which I think he's great at. He's really good at sort of numbers, getting to the nitty-gritty of things, so I think that's a good move. And I think it shows that they're moving into, as I'd call it, the next gear, because I don't think they were expecting for Labour to collapse so quickly.
No.
I think they thought, we can get everything in place gradually, sort out CCHQ, but Labour's collapsed so quickly, they move into the next gear.
Exactly, and a lot of people are now believing what I said last sort of summer, that, I'm not sure this government lasts, I certainly don't think Starmer lasts, but they may not last as a government. Like listening to what Liam Halligan had to say, financially, they're in a terrible state.
Right, well, I've always said that. And actually, at home, between me and my husband, he goes, no, turkeys won't vote for Christmas. They're going to stay there for the full 5 years, because none of them, he says, because we'd be employed to do anything else. I said, Phil, it's not going to be like this. They're not going to make a logical decision. It's going to be an emotional decision. We've seen them all turning on Starmer. You saw 127 of his backbenchers rebelling over the welfare change. So it'll be a combination of a crumbling of his backbenchers. You've now seen a new party set up by Corbyn and Zara Sultana. So if they get that up and going, the collective, then people will move over to there. And I agree with Liam and your good self. It'll be a financial disaster that's going to happen, and it will be taken out of their hands, and that is how things will move on. Yeah,
extraordinary. Final word about Ozzy Osbourne. Front pages today, the wonderful Wizard of Ozzy. I mean, everybody's got a story of one kind or another, whether it's just that you listen to the music. Did you ever see him?
So as a teenager, I had his album Paranoid. I had his greatest hits. I have to say, with hair like mine, you could see why I would like backcombing it, putting all the makeup on, which I obviously still do.
Air guitar.
Exactly, to go to sort of the heavy metal gigs and bars in Liverpool. So I did go through my little phase of heavy rock, and what a great performance. It was all theatre, wasn't it? It was all theatre, and so off his head some of the time. He did things I don't think he knew he was doing, which added to the performance. Well, a lot of people have said that the fact that he made it to 76 is quite an achievement, really. I think so. I think that's the wonders of modern medicine, is all I can say. Well, I was making this joke earlier. One of my favourite quotes was that he said that he took so much acid one day, he went into a field and started talking to a horse, and when the horse told him to F off, he went home. Well, you know, biting the bat and whatever else he was doing at the time, you know, lines of drugs, not knowing what he was taking. Unbelievable that he has lasted this long.
Exactly. And then, of course, the rebirth of the whole kind of the first proper reality TV show, which I remember watching the Osbournes on MTV, which was the beginning of a whole genre of television, which was hilarious. We were playing a clip from it earlier, chasing around after his dog. He was making a mess everywhere in his £8 million mansion, and he said, "I live in an £8 million turd." That was his quote. But
I think such a guess for us now, a great British eccentric, wasn't
definitely.
he? And I guess he didn't give a damn.
No.
So this is how he lived his life. And then there was huge honesty there. He'd made the mistakes, good, bad or indifferent. I guess he'd lived life to the extreme. And then he was coping with it as well. So I think all that, but obviously Sharon, his wife, I mean, God bless, she should get some sort of medal for having lived with him the full time.
She's quite a woman as well.
But now, I mean, they've spent their whole life together. Actually, you know, I know my heart goes out to her and her family, because I think they were like that, weren't they? They were absolutely soulmates.
Oh, totally, yeah. I mean, she was working here at Talk for a while, and she ended up going back to look after him because he needed an operation. And I remember her telling us that, you know, he was having to have this back operation. It was one of those that she didn't know if he would survive it. She was like, first, I have to be there because he might not make it through the end of the operation. So anyway, listen,
you can see that
an amazing woman. I've been told I've got to get out because it's getting late. Esther, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure.
We'll see you at the same time next week.